Use a warm, empathetic tone. Emma Thompson stood at the window of her small flat in Manchester, watching the rain fall on the empty street below. 3 years ago, people would stop her on these same streets, asking for autographs and telling her how much her music meant to them. Now, she walked to work each morning invisible and silent, just another face in the crowd. She had been 25 when her first album reached #1. For 15 wonderful years after that, Emma's voice filled concert halls across Europe and America. Her songs spoke of love, hope, and the beauty of human connection. Critics called her the voice of a generation, and millions of people found comfort in her melodies during their darkest hours. But all of that felt like someone else's life now. Emma touched the cold glass of the window and remembered the last concert she ever performed. It was in London at the Royal Albert Hall. Lucy, her younger sister, had been sitting in the front row as always, singing along to every word with tears of pride streaming down her face. After the show, Lucy had hugged her tight and whispered, "Emma, your music makes the whole world brighter." That was 6 months before the accident. Before that terrible December night when a drunk driver ran a red light and took Lucy away forever. Emma closed her eyes and could still hear the phone call from the hospital. She could still remember the cold hallway where a doctor with tired eyes told her that Lucy hadn't survived her injuries. The world had stopped spinning in that moment, and Emma wasn't sure it had ever started again. After Lucy's funeral, Emma returned to her flat and looked around at the life she had built. Gold records hung on the walls. Her piano sat in the corner where she and Lucy used to write songs together on Sunday afternoons. Her guitar leaned against the bookshelf, waiting for fingers that would never play it again. Everything reminded her of what she had lost. The music that had once brought her such joy now felt like a cruel joke. How could she sing about hope and love when the most important person in her life was gone? How could she bring comfort to others when her own heart was shattered beyond repair? Emma made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She sold her piano to a young family down the street. She canceled her recording contract and turned down 3 world tours. She packed away her stage clothes and put her guitar in the closet where she wouldn't have to see it every day. Her manager called dozens of times. "Emma, you can't just disappear," he pleaded during one conversation. "Your fans need you. Music needs you." But Emma hung up the phone and never answered his calls again. She found work at a small bookshop called Pages and Dreams, in a quiet part of the city. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly owner, hired her without asking many questions. Perhaps she saw the sadness in Emma's eyes and understood that some people needed gentle spaces to heal. Every morning, Emma would arrive at the shop before it opened. She would make tea, arrange the displays, and lose herself in the simple tasks of organizing books and helping customers. The work was quiet and predictable. Nobody asked her to perform or share her feelings. Nobody expected her to be inspiring or uplifting. Her old friends from the music industry tried to reach out, but Emma couldn't bear their sympathy or their encouragement to get back out there. She convinced herself that music had died with Lucy, and there was no point in pretending otherwise. Mrs. Patterson watched Emma with understanding eyes. Sometimes while they worked together, the older woman would hum old melodies, songs from her youth, classical pieces, even some of Emma's old hits. Emma could see that Mrs. Patterson was hoping for a reaction, maybe a small sign that the music still lived somewhere inside her. But Emma would always turn away and busy herself with another task. The bookshop became Emma's world. She knew every corner of it, every regular customer, every book on every shelf. In the mornings, she would dust the novels and arrange the poetry section. In the afternoons, she would help elderly customers find large print mysteries or recommend romance novels to lonely hearts. In the evenings, she would count the money and lock up, grateful for another day that had passed without having to think about the life she used to live. 2 years went by this way. 2 years of silence, of gray mornings and empty evenings. Emma convinced herself that this quiet existence was enough. She told herself that some people were meant to shine brightly for a while and then fade away, and that was perfectly fine. But as winter approached again, Emma began to feel the weight of her loneliness more heavily than ever before. The anniversary of Lucy's death was coming, and with it, all the memories she had tried so hard to bury. She had built walls around her heart so high that even the smallest joys of life couldn't reach her anymore. Sometimes, late at night in her flat, Emma wondered if this was all that was left of her life, an endless series of quiet days stretching into an equally quiet future. She didn't know that everything was about to change. Use a warm, empathetic tone. The December morning was especially cold when Mrs. Patterson found Emma arranging books near the front window. Snow had started to fall during the night, covering the street in a thin white blanket that reminded Emma too much of the winter Lucy died. "Emma dear," Mrs. Patterson said softly, "I hate to ask, but would you mind cleaning out the storage room downstairs? People have been donating books for months, and I'm afraid it's getting quite messy down there." She paused and looked at Emma with gentle concern. "Take your time with it. There's no rush." Emma nodded and made herself a cup of tea before heading to the basement. She was actually grateful for the task. The storage room was quiet and private, away from the customers who sometimes looked at her too closely, as if trying to remember where they had seen her face before. The basement smelled of old paper and dust. Boxes were stacked everywhere, some labeled fiction or children's books, others with no labels at all. Emma started with the nearest pile, sorting through romance novels, cookbooks, and outdated travel guides that people had cleaned out from their homes. Most of the books were in good condition, just outdated or no longer wanted. Emma found herself getting lost in the simple work of organizing and sorting. It reminded her of the early days at the bookshop, when the routine tasks had been a welcome escape from her grief. After an hour of sorting, Emma reached a box in the far corner that felt different from the others. It was smaller and heavier, made of dark wood instead of cardboard. When she opened it, she realized immediately that someone had donated it by mistake. Inside were personal belongings that clearly meant something to their owner. There was a faded photograph of a family at a beach, an elderly woman with two small children building sandcastles. There were handwritten letters tied with a blue ribbon, and at the bottom of the box, an old cassette player that looked like it was from the 1990s. A tape was still inside it, with a handwritten label that was too faded to read clearly. Emma held the cassette player in her hands, feeling its weight. She hadn't listened to music in over 2 years. She had avoided it completely, changing radio stations when songs came on, leaving restaurants when live musicians started playing. Music had become too painful, too connected to memories of Lucy and the life she used to live. But something about this old recording called to her. Maybe it was the curiosity about who had owned these precious items, or maybe it was the loneliness of the basement that made her feel safe enough to take a risk. With shaking fingers, she pressed the play button. The sound that came from the small speakers surprised her completely. It wasn't the pop music or classical pieces she had expected. Instead, she heard the voices of children singing together. They were young, maybe between 7 and 12 years old, and they were clearly performing in some kind of group setting. She could hear chairs scraping and papers rustling in the background. The children were singing simple songs, the kind taught in schools or community programs. Their voices weren't trained or perfect, but they sang with pure joy and enthusiasm that made Emma smile despite herself. She could picture them standing in a circle, some tall, some short, all trying their best to remember the words and stay in tune. Then something made Emma's heart stop completely. Rising above the other voices was a single child, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. She was singing a song Emma recognized immediately, because Emma had written it herself 6 years earlier. The song was called "Light in the Darkness," and Emma had composed it during a difficult time in her own life, before she became famous, when she was struggling to make ends meet as a street performer. The lyrics talked about finding hope when everything seemed lost, about believing that better days were coming even when you couldn't see them yet. But this little girl hadn't learned the song exactly as Emma had written it. She had changed some of the words, making them simpler, more suited to a child's understanding. Instead of the original lyrics about adult struggles, the girl sang about basic fears and hopes that any young person might feel. Emma listened with growing amazement as the child's voice continued. The girl's singing wasn't technically perfect, her pitch wavered sometimes and she took breaths in the middle of phrases. But there was something in her voice that Emma had forgotten could exist. It was pure hope, innocent and unguarded, the kind of optimism that believes everything will work out in the end. As the recording continued, other children joined the little girl in harmony. Their voices blended together in a simple but beautiful way, creating something that was far more moving than many professional performances Emma had heard. These children weren't singing to impress anyone or to make money or to become famous. They were singing because they loved it, because it made them happy, because it brought them together. Emma realized she was crying. For the first time in 2 years, she felt something crack open in her chest, a tiny space where feeling could enter again. Use a warm, empathetic tone. Emma carried the cassette player upstairs to her flat that evening, something she hadn't planned to do. For 2 years, she had kept her home completely free of anything that reminded her of music. But now she found herself sitting on her sofa, playing the recording over and over again. Each time she heard the little girl's voice singing her song, Emma felt something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't just surprise at hearing her own music performed by a child. It was something deeper, something that made her remember why she had started writing songs in the first place. The child sang with such pure emotion, such honest hope, that Emma began to wonder what kind of life this little girl was living. What struggles had she faced that made her connect so strongly with a song about finding light in darkness? And how had she learned Emma's music when Emma herself had disappeared from the public eye completely? That night, Emma slept better than she had in months. She dreamed of Lucy, but for the first time in 2 years the dreams weren't nightmares. Instead, she dreamed of Lucy sitting in a circle with other children, all of them singing together and laughing. The next morning at work, Emma examined the cassette player more carefully. There was a small, faded label stuck to the side that she hadn't noticed before. When she held it up to the light, she could just make out the words, Hope Community Center Children's Choir Practice 2023. During her lunch break, Emma used the computer at the bookshop to search for information about the Hope Community Center. What she found made her understand why the little girl's voice had sounded so full of both sadness and hope. The center was located in a quiet neighborhood about 30 minutes away by bus. According to their website, it was a place that helped families going through difficult times. They provided meals, temporary shelter, counseling, and activities for children whose parents were struggling with unemployment, illness, or other hardships. The website showed pictures of smiling children doing homework, playing games, and eating meals together. There was a section about their music program, which was run entirely by volunteers and donations. Emma read that many of the children who came to the center were dealing with stress and uncertainty at home, and that music helped them express their feelings and find moments of joy. Emma stared at the computer screen for a long time. She thought about her own childhood, growing up in a stable, loving home where her biggest worry was whether she would be good enough to perform in the school concert. These children were facing real hardships, yet they were still singing, still finding reasons to hope. On Saturday morning, Emma stood at the bus stop wearing her most ordinary clothes, her heart beating fast with nervousness. She hadn't planned to visit the community center. She had told herself she was just curious about where the recording came from. But somehow she found herself buying a bus ticket and making the journey across town. The Hope Community Center was smaller than she had expected, housed in a converted old church building. The walls were painted cheerful yellow, and children's drawings were taped to every window. Through the glass, Emma could see kids of different ages playing board games, reading books, and helping each other with homework. Emma stood outside for several minutes, unsure whether she should go in. What would she say? What reason could she give for being there? She was about to turn around and go home when a friendly voice called out behind her. Are you looking for someone? The voice belonged to a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair. She was carrying a box of donated toys and had a name tag that read, Miss Roberts, Volunteer Coordinator. I found a recording, Emma said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Children singing. I was wondering if I could learn more about your music program. Miss Roberts's face lit up with a warm smile. Oh, you must mean our little choir. The children absolutely love to sing together. It's one of our most popular activities. She paused and looked at Emma with gentle curiosity. Are you interested in volunteering? We always need help with our programs. Emma felt panic rise in her chest. She wasn't ready to volunteer or get involved. She had just wanted to satisfy her curiosity and then go back to her quiet life at the bookshop. But before she could make an excuse to leave, Miss Roberts was already walking toward the entrance. Would you like to meet them? They're practicing right now in our main room. I think they'd love to have a visitor who appreciates their music. Emma's heart pounded, but she found herself following Miss Roberts through the front door. The inside of the building was warm and welcoming, filled with the sounds of children talking and laughing. Artwork covered the walls, and comfortable furniture was arranged in small groups around the main space. Miss Roberts led Emma to a smaller room where about 12 children were sitting in a circle on colorful cushions. Ages ranged from about 6 to 13, and they were all looking expectantly at a thin girl with bright brown eyes who seemed to be their unofficial leader. Emma's breath caught in her throat. This was the girl from the recording, the one whose voice had cracked open something in Emma's heart. Use a warm, empathetic tone. Emma told Miss Roberts that her name was Emily when she filled out the volunteer application form. It wasn't exactly a lie, since Emily was her middle name, but it felt safer than revealing who she really was. She wasn't ready for anyone to know that Emma Thompson, the famous singer who had disappeared 3 years ago, was sitting in their community center wanting to help with children's music. At first, Emma kept herself busy with simple tasks. She would arrive early to set up chairs in a circle, organize the few pieces of sheet music they had, and help younger children find their places when practice began. She spoke quietly and tried to stay in the background, but she found herself drawn into the warmth and energy of the group. The girl from the recording was named Lily, and Emma learned that she was 10 years old. Lily had a natural ability to lead the other children, encouraging the shy ones to join in and helping the younger ones learn the words to songs. She seemed to know dozens of melodies, everything from popular songs she had heard on the radio to old folk tunes her grandmother had taught her. During their second week together, Lily approached Emma after practice with curious eyes. "Miss Emily," she said politely, "you know a lot about music. Did you study it in school or something?" Emma felt her cheeks grow warm. I used to sing when I was younger," she said carefully. "Just for fun, nothing special." But Lily wasn't fooled by Emma's modest answer. "You have a really pretty voice when you hum along," she said. "Maybe you could teach us some new songs sometime?" As the weeks passed, Emma found herself looking forward to her visits to the community center. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons became the brightest parts of her week. The children's enthusiasm was infectious, and slowly, Emma began to feel something she had thought was lost forever: joy in making music with others. Lily became especially dear to Emma's heart. The little girl had a way of asking thoughtful questions and sharing her feelings openly. One afternoon, while they were cleaning up after practice, Lily told Emma about her life. "My grandma and I had to leave our old house really fast," Lily explained, stacking cushions neatly in the corner. "There was a man there who wasn't nice to us, and Grandma said we had to go somewhere safe. So now we live at the family shelter down the street, and we're waiting for our own apartment." Emma's heart ached for this brave little girl who spoke about such difficult things with such matter-of-fact acceptance. "That must have been scary," Emma said gently. Lily nodded. "It was. But music helps when I'm scared. When I can't sleep at night in the shelter, I sing songs in my head. There's this singer I found online who wrote the most beautiful song called Light in the Darkness. Her voice sounds like she really knows what it's like to feel sad and worried, but also like she believes things can get better." Emma had to turn away to hide the tears that filled her eyes. To hear her own song described with such innocent appreciation, to know that something she had created was bringing comfort to this precious child, made her feel emotions she couldn't put into words. "I wish I could meet that singer someday," Lily continued, "just to say thank you for writing songs that make me feel less alone. I'm sure she would be very happy to know her music helped you," Emma managed to say, her voice slightly shaky. As more weeks went by, Emma found herself participating more actively in the children's choir. At first she just hummed along quietly. Then she began singing softly, helping the younger children learn harmonies and remember lyrics. Her voice was rusty from lack of use and sometimes it cracked or wavered, but the children didn't seem to mind at all. The other volunteers at the center began to notice Emma's musical abilities, but they respected her obvious wish for privacy. Miss Roberts would sometimes give her encouraging smiles, and Mr. James, who helped with activities for older children, mentioned that the kids seemed more confident in their singing when Emma was there. One Thursday in March, Lily arrived at practice with red eyes and a worried expression. She sat quietly in the circle, not joining in when the other children started their warm-up songs. Emma noticed immediately and sat down beside her. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Emma asked softly. "My grandma is in the hospital," Lily whispered, her voice shaking. "She got really sick yesterday and the ambulance had to come. The doctors don't know what's wrong with her yet, and I'm scared she might not get better." Emma felt her heart break for this little girl who had already faced so much uncertainty in her young life. Without thinking, she reached out and took Lily's small hands in her own. "Would it help if we sang together?" Emma asked gently. "Sometimes when I'm worried, music helps me feel less alone." For the first time in 3 years, Emma Thompson sang with her full voice. She started with Light in the Darkness, the song that had brought them together, and her voice was rusty and uncertain at first. But as she saw the comfort it brought to Lily as she watched the other children join in with growing confidence, Emma felt her voice grow stronger and clearer. Use a warm, empathetic tone. Emma spent 3 weeks organizing what she hoped would be the most important concert of her life, though she had no intention of performing in it herself. She contacted every local musician she could find, from folk singers who played in coffee shops to the church choir from down the street. She designed simple flyers and posted them around the neighborhood, asking people to come support the Hope Community Center. The response surprised her. Within a week, she had commitments from 8 different acts, and Miss Roberts was getting calls from people wanting to buy tickets. Even Mrs. Patterson from the bookshop had volunteered to help sell refreshments, though she looked at Emma with curious eyes, as if sensing there was more to her quiet employee than met the eye. Emma threw herself into the planning with an energy she hadn't felt in years. She arranged for chairs to be set up in the center's main hall, organized a simple sound system borrowed from a local church, and coordinated with each performer about their song choices and timing. The work felt good, purposeful in a way that organizing books never had. But as the night of the concert approached, Emma's old fears began to return. She had promised herself that she would stay behind the scenes, managing the event while others took the spotlight. The thought of standing in front of an audience still made her hands shake and her breath come short. On the evening of the benefit concert, about 60 people filled the small auditorium. Emma recognized faces from around the neighborhood, volunteers from the center, and families who had been helped by the center's programs. The atmosphere was warm and supportive, filled with the kind of community spirit that made people want to help their neighbors. Emma positioned herself at the side of the stage, where she could manage the sound system and signal to each act when it was their turn to perform. She wore all black and kept her hair pulled back, hoping to remain invisible while the real performers shared their gifts. The evening began beautifully. A teenage girl sang a folk song while playing guitar. The church choir performed 2 hymns that had everyone humming along. An elderly man played piano pieces that reminded Emma of the music her grandmother used to love. Each act was received with enthusiastic applause, and Emma could see donations being placed in the collection boxes at the back of the room. The children's choir was scheduled to be the final performance of the evening. Emma watched from the wings as the 12 young performers filed onto the stage, their faces glowing with excitement and nervousness. Lily, who had become the unofficial leader of the group, took her place at the center. Emma's heart clenched as she looked at Lily. The little girl had been struggling all week with worry about her grandmother, who was still in the hospital recovering from pneumonia. The doctors said she would be fine, but Lily had been having trouble sleeping and eating, consumed with fear about the most important person in her life. The children began with a simple song they had learned together, their young voices blending sweetly in the small space. The audience smiled and nodded encouragingly, charmed by their enthusiasm and effort. Then Lily stepped forward to perform her solo, the song that had started everything, Light in the Darkness. For a moment, Lily's voice rang out clear and strong, just as Emma remembered from that first recording months ago. The audience grew quiet, sensing something special in this little girl's performance. But halfway through the second verse, Emma noticed Lily's voice beginning to waver. The child was fighting back tears, thinking about her grandmother lying in the hospital bed, thinking about all the uncertainty in her young life. Her voice grew smaller and more shaky with each line, and Emma could see the confusion and worry in her eyes. Lily's gaze moved desperately across the audience, then found Emma standing in the shadows at the side of the stage. The little girl's eyes were pleading, asking wordlessly for the help and comfort that only music could provide. In that look, Emma saw not just Lily's need, but the needs of every person in that room who had faced loss, fear, or hardship. In that moment, Emma understood something that changed everything. For 3 years she had told herself that her silence was a way of honoring Lucy's memory, a tribute to the sister she had lost. But now she realized the truth, her silence had been a waste of Lucy's legacy. Lucy had always believed that music could heal any wound, bridge any gap between people, and bring hope to those who had lost their way. Lucy had sat in the front row of every concert not just because she loved Emma, but because she believed in the power of songs to make the world better. By hiding her gift, by letting fear control her choices, Emma had let her sister down in the worst possible way. Taking a deep breath that felt like her first real breath in 3 years, Emma stepped out of the shadows and walked onto the stage. A gasp went through the audience as people recognized the famous singer who had disappeared from public life, but Emma had eyes only for Lily. She took the little girl's trembling hand and began to sing. The end.